Well, I think we'll get started because some of you will have seen us before, and we'll just go through some briefer introductions, and then we'll move on to today's topic. So, this one is webinar 5, tackling telephone and video interviews. So if this is the first time that you've joined us for a webinar, welcome. If you've been on some of them or all of them, then welcome back. And this does slot in with the each of the modules. So this is number 5 of 8, and we're running a topic each week, although we are doing a bonus session for assessment centres most Fridays, if you haven't seen that. But we are actually running assessment centres all of next week, so make sure you get signed up for those. So the webinars are fairly short, so they tend to last sort of 30 to 35 minutes. You can ask questions at any point during the webinars, so we suggest that you use, or in fact we're asking you to use the chat box to ask any questions, and just pop your question in there, set it to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see the question and everyone can see the response. We've had a real mixed bag of questions on the webinars, so sometimes it's really quiet and there are no questions, other times we struggle to keep up with them. So Helen's on questions today, so if you want to keep Helen nice and busy, that's great. So feel free to just ping questions in there as you think of them, or if you want to wait till the end, we will have a little bit of time at the end where we'll just pull any questions together, or if there's any outstanding questions, we'll take them then as well. So there's a fair amount of content in here. It's hard for us to pitch it to suit everybody's knowledge and experience. So some of you will never have done a telephone or interview before. Some of you will have done a few. So you'll have a variation in terms of experience. So we're hopeful that with the information in the webinar, you can come back to the bits that are particularly relevant to you. So you will get a copy of the slides afterwards. So as always, as I said before, ask those questions. So be present and get involved if you've got some questions or comments at any point. If you want to just set your phone to mute or silent so that you're not distracted during this short time that we've got together. And then finally, just make use of the tools that are available. So we refer to various tools, and I think we've got some resources to share with you at the end of this webinar, like we do on most of them. And make use of them. Use all of the tools that are available. If you have missed any of the previous webinars or you'd like to go back and revisit them, then take a look at our YouTube channel, because we've been uploading one from each week there. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll get an alert each time we release a new video. One of the tools that I will refer to a lot, and I make no apologies for it, is your careers service. They're all doing phenomenal things. They're all offering things online at the moment. So if you haven't already, definitely check them out and see what they're offering. So some brief intros, if this is the first time you've met us. I'm Sophie, I'm MD here at SRS. We work with employers and universities within graduate recruitment. So we design assessment materials and processes for big employers. And we work with universities usually to run assessment centre simulations for universities. I'm also the author of the book From Learner to Earner, which this series is based upon. Now, I've just noticed that our contact details are not on this screen, and they normally are. So if you haven't already connected with us on LinkedIn or over on Twitter, then feel free to do that. And you can easily find either of us just by searching for our names. It seems as we've forgotten to put the links on for
yeah, it's not deliberate. We're not overloaded. You can connect in with us. It's
all
good.
No, we love connecting with you. We really do. So, Helen, do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm the University Partnerships Manager at SRS, and I work with Sophie to run employability workshops and assessment centre experiences for students like yourselves. Hope you're continuing to find these webinars useful. As I say, I'm on questions and answers today in Zoom chat. So feel free to keep me busy. A couple of you have already got involved there. And just a quick reminder, if you can set it to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your comments, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. So at various points, we will be joined by experts in graduate recruitment to hear their valuable insight and top tips. Today, we have some advice from the lovely Gemma Hurt. So Gemma is a graduate recruiter for GE Aviation, and she's also been a graduate recruiter for a number of other big employers as well. So she's got some fantastic experience to share with us. So she'll be joining us on a couple of video clips today. So in terms of what to expect, Very straightforward, this one. It's going to be what to expect within telephone and video interviews, some common mistakes of things that we've seen in the past, and then Helen's going to talk us through how to answer the most challenging questions that you are likely to come across in a telephone or video interview. So to start us off, why are employers using these methods? Well, as society continues to embrace the digital world, more and more employers are using telephone or video interviews as part of their application process. At this stage, employers want to ensure that the strongest candidates make it through to the assessment centre or final interview. So why are recruiters using these methods in particular? So it does allow them to see more people in less time, which is important given the high numbers of applicants applying for graduate roles. It allows recruiters to test you on your CV and application form to see if the information you've included adds up. And it allows recruiters to measure communication skills, so they'll be paying attention to how well you conduct yourself and how you respond to their questions. With video interviews, these enable employers to see an applicant's flair or personality. And they also support recruiters who need to conduct interviews long distance, which clearly, let's face it, right now, that's kind of everyone in the current situation. Now, for the purpose of this webinar, we're kind of assuming that telephone and video interviews do fit in the graduate recruitment process before an assessment centre or final interview. But a lot of the tips that we give will be relevant to any interview, to be honest. So you can apply it to either. But for when we created this webinar, it was thinking that that's where it would fit in with the process. So what to expect in a telephone interview? Well, often graduate recruiters will want to carry out a first interview over the telephone. So knowing what to expect from this call and being prepared should always be at the top of your agenda. Now, telephone interviews in the context that I've just described, as in before an assessment centre, they would typically last around 20 to 30 minutes. So you will need to be succinct with your responses, but not too brief. If it's an interview that happens to be done by telephone or video, but it's a later part of the process and it's replaced something that's face-to-face, that interview is likely to be longer than 20 to 30 minutes. But you will know that based on the invitation that the employer gives you. Usually there would only be one interviewer on a telephone. The interview may be recorded, but the interviewer should let you know if that's the case. You'll likely be asked some questions based on your CV, work experience and education, and typically competency-based interview questions will be asked in order to draw out your skills, experience and knowledge. Here are some typical questions that you might expect to hear at a telephone interview. I've actually prepared an interview preparation using STAR worksheet to help you structure your responses. So we will include this as a resource that we send out with the webinar slides today. And I will briefly talk through the STAR technique if you've not come across it already a bit later on in the webinar. But by using the STAR technique to answer these typical questions, it will ensure that you give a full response that's likely to tick all of the criteria that you're being assessed against. Moving on to video interviews. So pre-recorded video interviews are rapidly becoming popular amongst graduate recruiters. According to a recent survey that was carried out by the Institute of Student Employers, 53% of organisations are now using them as part of their selection process. And as we keep saying, this is likely to be much higher right now. Pre-recorded video interviews are commonly used where there is high volume recruitment for graduate roles, but there is a small chance that you might have to complete a live video interview, particularly if the role is in another country and you're at the final stage of the process. Give some consideration to how you would dress for the video interview. You'll likely be sent an invitation to log in to a system where you can access the video link and it would have a full set of instructions. You'll probably be asked to answer a series of pre-recorded questions, and these questions are typically, the video interview, so you're likely to be asked a series of pre-recorded questions, and video interviews typically last around 30 minutes. They will be recorded, and there's often an opportunity to have a practice run. And Gemma, when she shares some of her advice later, tells us a little bit about practice runs, but these are suggested that you use the practice run so that you can get used to the system and format. You could be asked questions based on your CV, work experience and education, as well, as we said before, with telephone ones. And again, typically competency-based interview questions are likely to be asked. So let's hear from Gemma with her first little bit of advice for us.
Hi everyone, I'm Gemma Hurt. I have been in early careers for a very long time, so I've seen a lot of video interviews, so hopefully these hints and tips will help. So the main thing is to treat your video interview like a real interview. So what do I mean? So dress the part. So even though you aren't travelling into an office or a site to meet your potential new employees, make sure you dress for an interview. That will just make you feel much more professional, and you'll feel like you're really in the right mindset for the interview. Also, think about your background. I haven't done that today, so you can tell I'm sitting in my bed. So just have a think about, what does the interviewer actually see when they're watching your video interview, either live or watching it playback. So just have a look when you switch your camera on. What can they see behind you? So if you're in your room, maybe sit at a table, sit at a desk, and make sure you haven't got all your kind of dirty washing or anything behind you. So just have a look at what is the view that your interviewer will see. Also, if you live with your housemate or family, just let them know that an interview is happening. They wouldn't be coming along to a real face-to-face interview. So just make them treat it like a real interview. So ask them to be quiet. Make sure you shut whatever room you're in, shut the door, and just make sure that there's as little background noise as you can do. Not always possible, I appreciate, but where possible, try and make sure that you treat the environment in a calm and professional manner. Also, if you're in your interview, you probably wouldn't have lots of notes with you. So just try and not overly rely on kind of scripted answers or having notes on your desk, you're looking down like I am all the time throughout the interview. You want to try and keep the answers quite fluid and flowing. So don't think because they can't see what you're doing. Your interview will still be able to see if you're kind of checking lots of notes. If you do need notes, maybe stick them above your camera line. So when you're reading them, you're still maintaining eye contact, but don't rely on them too much because it will still the conversation, even if the conversation is only one way. So that's my real tip. Just treat it like a real interview. Relax as much as you can. Enjoy it. Make sure you lots of prep in advance so you're really ready and feel like you're giving your best answers. Good luck.
Okay, thank you from Gemma there. So I really like Gemma's point around being, clear about what the background is that you see. Helen and I have often talked about an example where I was interviewing someone who had rows of garden gnomes behind him in the interview, which was unusual and a bit distracting. And we've got some funny stories of other things that we've seen at video interview to share in a bit. So in terms of having a go, if you have a look on the screen here, we've listed 3 different video interview providers who are the main video providers, I would say, for graduate recruiters in this country. And we've got links to each of their websites to share with you. So we will share these in the post-webinar email that will come out to you with this recording. And on all of their websites, they've got hints and tips, and also some of them do some practice runs. So if you haven't had a practice before, or you want to develop in this area, which I'm guessing you do because you're on this webinar, then take a bit of time and check out what they've got to advise. So there are a few common mistakes that could mean the difference between ruining your chances and moving to the next stage. So some important things to avoid would include using slang words or abbreviations, as the interviewer might not understand what you're talking about. Taking your call in an unsuitable location, so maybe in public somewhere, or somewhere that's noisy or not got great reception, etc. Forgetting your scheduled interview, so that's more with telephone interviews, as video interviews, if they're pre-recorded, can be done anytime. But that does happen where we're scheduled to interview someone at a set time and they don't pick up because they've forgotten it, and it'd be unusual that the employer would give you a second chance, so make sure it's in your diary. Swearing, believe it or not, is something that we've seen quite a bit on video interviews. So don't do it. It's not good to spot that. Being interrupted or getting distracted. So make sure that you are in that quiet room. You've put the sign on the door if you're in a house that's pretty busy or whatever. Eating or chewing gum in particular, you can pick that up really easily on a telephone or video interview. Running out of phone or your laptop battery dying midway through the interview, so make sure everything's fully charged. And finally, should be straightforward, but don't smoke or talk about yourself in the third person, or even accidentally, as we've heard on a couple of occasions, finish off the call with a "I love you, bye," which is very nice, but not hugely professional. So I said I'd tell you some funny stories. So let me share a few things that I've seen or heard about for videos. So one of the video interview companies that we listed on the screen just before is called Shine. And Shine shared an example with me once about one of their clients who told them about a candidate who ended up swearing at their mum on the video. So the candidate was apparently answering a question that they'd been asked in the video interview. And then their mum, who was sitting in the room while the candidate recorded their interview, helpfully chimed in with, "Well, I wouldn't have said that," before the candidate had stopped the recording. And the candidate's reaction while still recording was to call their mum a few things that you'd certainly not expect someone to call their mum. So ban your mum from the room. An employer contact of mine, Paul, he told me about a video interview where the candidate's webcam fell to a 90-degree angle, and instead of taking just a few seconds to adjust the camera, the candidate just tilted his head to the side and continued that way for the rest of the recording, which Paul thought was very bizarre. So if things like that happen, just take a moment just to get things back to how they should be. And then I think my funniest one that always makes me chuckle, even though I've recalled it a few times now, is Philippa, who is an HR director based out in Dubai. She interviewed someone who was having technical issues with their video, and it was a live interview where Philippa was with, it was a panel interview, there were 3 of them live video interviewing someone, and there were some technical issues with this video, so the candidate called in their housemate, and the housemate entered the room completely naked. And Philippa says, well, at least it broke the ice between everyone. And in case you're wondering, the naked guy, when he realised that he was on camera, tried to protect his dignity with the curtain. So they had a bit of a laugh about that. But yeah, pre-warn any housemates or family members, because these things do happen. So we've talked about what not to do, but here are some opportunities to stand out for the right reasons. There are many things that you can do to prepare for a telephone or video interview. So here are a few things that you can do to make a good impression. So do your research, look at both the job role and the organisation that you're applying to, what stands out. Have a copy of your CV and application form to hand so you know what you've submitted already. Have a notepad and pen ready so that you can make any notes that you want to take as you go. You can prepare your answers to an extent, and you don't want to do that too much because you don't want to come across as being scripted, but you can think about typical questions that you may be asked and how you might respond to these. Also, write down any questions that you'd like to ask. So this is mainly for a telephone interview or a live video interview, because at the end in those situations, you are very likely to be asked if you have any questions. So ask something that will make you stand out, and I think we're going to cover that in more detail shortly. And then get rid of any distractions. So turn off the TV or radio and ensure that you're in a private space. There's nothing worse, as we've discovered, than having your flatmate or your parents walking in while you're in the middle of a conversation. A few additional things to consider when preparing specifically for a video interview. So organise your surroundings, as Gemma mentioned before, make sure they're tidy and presentable. Dress appropriately. So if you're applying for a creative role, for example, you might want to dress a bit more casually or a bit more fashionably potentially, but otherwise smart and professional is the way to go. Test your equipment and make sure that your camera and your computer are working correctly and that your internet speed and sound quality are good before your call. There's nothing worse than a call that keeps losing connection. It's so frustrating. We do cover tech top tips in the Assessment Centre webinar, so if you've not joined us on that or you're planning to join next week, then we will cover that in a bit more detail. So I'm going to hand you over to Helen now, who is going to talk us through what to do and what not to do with some of the most challenging questions you're likely to get.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk through some challenging questions and probably some of the more commonly asked questions that you'd get asked as well. So what do you know about the company? In terms of how you respond to this, you want to give a brief overview of the research you've done into that particular organisation, their mission, their values, cultural characteristics that stand out to you, and make sure you delve that bit deeper when you do research the organisation. So a lot of candidates respond with the same headline information they've taken from the website homepage, but you really want to show that you have gone beyond that and really seen what they're all about and what they're working on. Things you want to avoid saying, obviously, is saying not that much, as I haven't done any research. Don't admit to that. You want to really show that you've done your homework into the company. Talk me through your CV. So every interview I've had has typically involved this question in some form or another. And it's important to briefly summarise your CV. You don't want to go into too much detail and take it through fact by fact. You want to summarise your education and your work experience, highlighting those key achievements and successes that you're particularly proud of, but also that are most relevant to the role you're applying for. And this is one to really prepare in advance of the interview, because, as I say, you want to be able to draw out those key points. So don't go overboard and give too much detail, and keep it relevant. What interests you about the role you've applied for? So again, it's going back to that point around, have you researched the organisation? So it's slightly similar to the first question we looked at. But it's also in particular reference to the specific job description. So you want to show that you've really reviewed that job description, that you've identified the key skills that employer is looking for, and talk about why you think you're the best person for that role, how you have demonstrated the key skills that job description is looking for. It's a really good opportunity to get your passion across, your personality, and your own personal values. What you don't want to say, as it says there on the screen, is you don't want to say something like the salary is good or I need a job. You don't want to give too much of a generic answer where you say, oh, it looks like a really good graduate scheme, or you look like a really successful company that's doing good things. You don't want to be that broad, that general. Again, it's that opportunity to show that you've done your homework on the job description and you've really looked into the organisation. What experience do you have that makes you a suitable candidate? So again, it's one about having a look at your education, your work experience, but also your extracurricular activities as well, things that you've done on a voluntary basis, perhaps you've been a carer, all of those experiences where you can draw out those transferable skills and relate them to the job description you've gone for. So for example, if they say on the job description they're looking for a problem solver, then look at your experience and be able to draw out an example from it that matches that particular skill. Don't be put off by the fact that you might not have relevant work experience in that particular industry. Yes, it helps if you have got that, but if you haven't, it's about drawing the skills from the rest of the experience you've got, because you can still be related to that role and the skills you've learned. And what not to say, I'd hope none of you would say, I made the tea and emptied the bins. I think that'll be an instant disqualification in a lot of ways. It's about drawing out those transferable skills. What are your career goals for the future? So absolutely, put some thought into thinking about this before the interview. You might want to think about short-term objectives. So what you want your first 3 months to look like in the organisation, what level of support you'd expect. Or you may want to look more long-term and talk about where you see yourself in a couple of years' time. But either way, show a real passion for your personal development. Show that you've thought about what you want to do and where you see yourself, and use it as another opportunity to showcase your commitment and your strengths. What you don't want to say again is things like doing your job. Yeah, I just want to learn the role and have a bit of an experience in the department. Again, you want to give a really, really powerful answer as to where you see yourself, the departments you want to work in, who you want to work with, what you want to learn. And finally, do you have any questions? So you get asked this, whether it's at the end of a video interview, a telephone interview, that final interview at the end of the whole process. You must always have a bank of questions ready to ask the assessor at the end of the interview. And it could be that there's the opportunity to ask questions as you actually go along, and you might think, oh, well, I've asked a couple of questions already, so I don't need to ask anything further at the end. You should still have even just 1 or 2 killer questions that you have at the end of the interview. So make sure you have got that bank of questions to draw from. And in terms of what those questions look like, make them questions that you couldn't have just found the answer to on the website by just having a quick look. You want to ask really insightful questions, things like, I've seen that in your business plan, you're looking to reduce your carbon emissions by 20%, for example. Can you tell me more about that? I've seen that you're looking to explore this and that. You can show off how much research you've done into the company by the questions that you ask. What not to say is things like, no, I don't have any. As I say, we've always got to have a question, or we've covered it already.
Thank you. And just on that point, I think I said I'd mentioned something around questions to ask. I think that the suggestions Helen's given there are really, really good. And I think there's no harm in having some questions written down that you know you'll be able to ask them at the end. And you can do this whether it's on the phone or a live video, or if it's a face-to-face interview as well. And my top tip, my top killer question is to actually ask them about themselves. So I've seen this done so well. I've never seen it done badly, and I've only seen it on a very, very rare occasion. So this is definitely my killer question. But ask them, how long have you worked at IBM or PwC or whatever company it is? And what you'll get from that is, so then they'll tell you 5 years, whatever it's been, 2 years, and then ask them what they particularly enjoy about their job. And that will do a series of things. One, it will show you, it'll catch them off guard because they probably haven't been asked that before, or not very often. And if you ask them that, then you're going to see an instant reaction from them about what they feel about that company, which I think is super useful for you to then work out whether that's a company that you think you do want to work for. And you'll be able to tell from their response, how genuine they are in what they say. I'm sure they'll be positive, but you'd be able to pick up in the tone of their voice or their body language if you can see them. But as well, if it is a job that you really want and they're particularly enthusiastic about that role and that makes you want it even more, then it just helps you to build even more rapport with them. Hopefully you've been able to do that throughout the interview anyway, but by asking people about themselves, people love talking about themselves, and interviewers and assessors, they're used to asking the questions. So actually you turn it back and asking them questions and getting them to talk about themselves, trust me, it will pay off. It really will. It's a classic. So that's my top tip. Write that one down and ask them that. That will be a good one. So you can see on the screen here the STAR technique. We have introduced this, I think, in a previous webinar. If not, I'm sure it'll be in another. In fact, I know we have. But if this is the first time, you might not have seen this before, or you may have seen it as the STAR technique, but without the two R's, with just one R. So we add that extra one for reflection because we think that adds a bit more value as well. So if you're answering particularly a competence-based question, then do use this technique because it will help you to structure your responses. So you need to lay out the situation you were facing, the task you had to do, and the action you took and the result. Now, just to give you a bit of an example as to how you might do that, it could be that you had a part-time job working in a busy restaurant. So that might be the situation that you work part-time at the weekends or in the evenings or whatever in a busy restaurant. And typically you would be working, preparing the food, helping one of the chefs prepare the food. But on a particular occasion, 3 of the serving staff had rung in sick, and actually the action that you took was that you supported the serving staff by going out and taking a few of the orders, and that resulted in being able to maintain service that evening, which meant that the customers didn't realise that you had staffing problems. Everyone was still getting their food at an appropriate time, and you were able to work together as a team. The reflection might be that actually on reflection, you realised it was really helpful that that each of the team members were trained in different areas of the restaurant, so that in future occasions where there was sickness, you were able to cover for each other more appropriately. So that might be an example, and I'm sure you'll have your own that you can apply to that. So a few top tips here. First of all, to show the best you, take your time, stay calm, and try not to speak too fast. If anything, people do tend to speak too fast, and I'm guilty of that myself. And whenever I read something out like this, it makes me just kind of slow down a bit. But yeah, try to slow your pace and think about what you're saying. Be polite, smile, and avoid using any slang. So smiling, even when the person can't see you, maybe it's on the phone, it does, I'm smiling right now. Hopefully you can hear that in my voice. So it does come across, and it just helps to relax you as well. Try to come across as being confident and professional. Do your research in advance and know why you're attracted to the organisation and the role, and be prepared and be ready to discuss that. Have anything that you've completed in advance to hand, so the CV perhaps, if you've had to submit that, an application form, or the job description for the role if you have that. It might be that at this stage in the process you submitted an application form months before, so definitely revisit that and make sure you remember what you put on that, and that will help as being part of your preparation. Make notes, and as we said before, do ask some questions. So we're just going to hear from Gemma again.
Or in my hints and tips, pretty much I've seen a video of somebody not breaking them, but kind of going against my advice with clearly looking down and reading notes in their joggers, in a quite messy room, and kind of hearing lots of background noise. So I've pretty much seen a video interview covering most of those elements. But also one that's quite funny is, I had a question in the video interview bank which says it wasn't assessed, and it was, what food would you take on a desert island? And one candidate thought because it wasn't assessed, I wouldn't see the answer. So instead of answering, I would take potatoes or whatever it could be, they actually just went la 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 through the whole answer. So obviously it assumed that I wasn't going to see it. I found it quite funny because it wasn't really a question that I was going to kind of assess, but somebody else might not have found it as amusing as I did. So even if a question is asked or framed that it won't be assessed, don't assume that no one's going to see it.
Good advice there again from Gemma, quite amusing. Before we share with you the resources that we've got available from this webinar, we just want to quickly run through there what you can expect if you join us next week for assessment centres. So we are talking about in-person and digital assessment centres, very topical right now. The different types of exercises that you're likely to see in either of those, and also clearly how to be ready for them. So the resources that we've got relating to telephone and videos include the practice websites that we pointed out earlier, the interview preparation using STAR worksheet that I mentioned as well, as always your career service, and also a link to the book which the webinar series is based upon. Before we move on to sort of finish off with any questions, we are a sociable bunch. We'd love to hear your comments and views, and we've really enjoyed being tagged on various posts, particularly on, I think, Twitter and LinkedIn seem to be the favourites, which tend to be our favourites as well, to be fair. So we've really appreciated that. Please do follow us if you're not already. We've got the YouTube channel there where all the previous webinars have been posted, and we're using the hashtag #LockdownYourCareer. Once you come off this webinar, you will be directed to a super short survey. It takes less than 2 minutes to complete. We'd love your feedback. We really appreciate you taking the time to give us that feedback. So that would be marvellous. Now, Helen, I've seen a few flashes there. Have we had some good questions today?
We have had some good questions. There's a couple I'll take at the end because I thought it would save me typing away. Just before I delve into them, yes, you will be getting a recording of this webinar that will be sent out to you by the end of tomorrow, so you'll be able to review the slides and all of the chat as well. So one of the questions that I haven't yet responded to: how can I persuade a prospective employer that I'm skilled in my particular field when presently I had to take up supply teaching in a school just to survive? So it is, all work experience is relevant. Yes, you've got an advantage if you've got work experience in the same field or industry that you're applying to. But you can draw those transferable skills from anything you've done. And actually, to be able to turn around to an employer and say, during the pandemic, this is what I did with that time. So I was quite proactive. I saw that I couldn't go for my first choice. Perhaps my internship was cancelled or so on, but this is what I chose to do instead. I worked in a supermarket, or did supply teaching so that I could still carry on my professional development, learning skills in this area. And it's a chance to show how resilient you've been, really, that you've been open to other opportunities. And actually, some employers are incorporating these kind of questions into their interview around how did you respond to the pandemic? What did you do with the time? So yes, it's an advantage if you've got relevant work experience, but it doesn't exclude you from going for that opportunity as long as you can show that you've got those transferable skills. Another question there: in light of recent relaxation from lockdown restrictions, and given the fact that organisations have started to move their businesses back to workplace, do we expect interviews to take place face-to-face, or will it remain virtual? So I have had a few conversations with employers over the last few weeks, and the feeling is that there's going to be a bit of a combination going forward. So about 50% of graduate employees in a recent survey from the Institute of Student Employers have said that they're still going to run their assessment centres online. And as usual, as part of an assessment centre, there is an interview involved in that. But for the final interview, there's usually that final one-to-one interview stage at the end of the process. A lot of them would prefer to do that in person. So when restrictions are relaxed, there'll probably be a mix of virtual exercises and video interviews, but they'll still try to have that personal interaction at the end of the process. So really, you're going to have to be prepared to do both. And I know there was a question around someone had actually been given a choice as to whether they do a video interview or an in-person interview, which is great that they're given that choice, because I don't often see that. Again, that's a difficult decision to make, but just choose the one that you feel most comfortable doing. If they've given you that choice, then you know they won't mind which one you choose to go for. Choose the one that you'll give the best confident version of yourself. I do feel that an in-person interview does give you that opportunity to make more of a personal connection. You know, they can see more of you, they can see more of your body language than they would on a screen. But certainly employers at the moment are very, very accepting of the fact that some people need to do a video interview if they're vulnerable, and that's absolutely fine to do that as well. We've got some more that have come in since, I think. Have a little look. Is it appropriate to have things like your CV out during a face-to-face interview, or is this frowned upon? Yeah, you can have your CV to hand, absolutely. You know, you can glance at it. Someone asked about having notes during an interview. Yeah, you can have some notes to hand. You can have your CV to hand. Just make sure you don't read from it. You want to use it as more of a prompt than anything else, to have a quick glance and then to almost put it to one side and carry on the conversation. I just find sometimes when you have got notes, particularly in an in-person interview, just make sure it doesn't obstruct your hands and your body language, because certainly you can get your personality across when you're using your hands to emphasize key points, things like that. Just having a little look. See, do you think year-long placements will go ahead in 2021? Well, now that's a difficult one. So I know some of the larger firms are looking to still do this. For some of the smaller, medium-sized enterprises, it's a bit more of a challenge. But to be honest with you, the next few weeks are going to make all the difference around the decisions that businesses make, because they're still waiting for a lot of guidance from government, and they're still kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. So a lot of them haven't committed to certain things even in the autumn, let alone next year. So I'd like to think that yes, there will be some placements still going ahead next year. But I mean, I can't guarantee that at this point, because employers are still hedging their bets. They're still looking to see what's going to happen in the future. What do you think about the importance of shaking hands for interviews? Yes, I think it's very important, providing you can do it. And at the moment, you can't. And COVID means that you can't do that. And again, an employer understands that. So, you know, it's not going to be an issue for any recent interviews that you've got. But when
I think employers would probably make a bit of a joke about that right now, if you're at the point where you do face-to-face, if it's still not allowed. As well, so I think yeah,
probably break the ice a bit, won't it? They won't be coming at you with their marigolds on, trying to shake your hand at least. but I mean, if we weren't in a pandemic and these restrictions weren't happening, then yes, you would take the opportunity to shake hands with the assessor. We got any further questions there? I hope I've covered them all. A lot came in thick and fast at the end there. I hope I've got them.
Get loads of questions. I love all the questions.
If you have more than one interviewer, should you ask each a question at the end or throughout? Yeah, I'd certainly try to. So if you've got a panel, try and direct a question at each one. And that's why it's important to have that bank of questions that you can draw from. You definitely want to make eye contact and direct your answers at different assessors as you're going through the interview. But yeah, definitely try and engage with each interview. Have a question for each. You might have some broad questions that you can direct at different people. Yeah, I think that's all. If anyone thinks of any questions, we've got another one here. If you have more than one interviewer, sorry, we've had that one. Yeah, I think. Let's see if we've got anything further. If you do think of any other questions, say link in with us. Some of you have already linked in with me during this webinar, which is great. And if you have any further questions, just drop us a line on there.
Yeah, and please do fill out the survey. We really appreciate you taking the time. It's literally less than 2 minutes to fill out the survey, and hopefully we'll see you on social or on a future webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.